Ladies and gentlemen, I caved and purchased something that I originally said I didn't need. I decided that maybe it would make my videos clearer, and let's face it, I'm an Atari channel. If it involves Atari, I should cover it. So I went on Amazon and purchased the Retron 77. Oh, and a 2600 Plus too, but who cares about that? Okay, in all seriousness, I got both units brand new just a few weeks ago, and the sole purpose, besides covering them on the channel, and hoping to get better quality gameplay videos, was for this very project. We are doing the Retron 77 versus the 2600 Plus, and I think most of you know which one is going to win, most of the time. So it's less about competing them against each other, and more about trying to find out which scenario, and for which people, each unit is best for. So let's find out who should purchase a Retron 77 by Hyperkin, and who should get the brand new 2600 Plus by Atari. Let's start by opening these babies up, and I was surprised at how small the boxes were for each of them. I figured that the Retron 77 was going to be quite small, but I couldn't help but to be surprised at how small it was. This includes the packaging it came in. Upon opening the box, I was quite pleased at how nicely packaged everything was, and the unit itself looks pretty nice too. It feels light, but the buttons and switches feel nice, and I don't feel that they cheaped out on anything important, at least not at first sight. The controller that comes with the unit is a pretty cool recreation of the original CX40 Atari 2600 controller. It has 2 buttons, but I believe that's just for people who want to use it left-handed or right-handed, because there's one big difference between the Retron 77 and the 2600 Plus, and that's the fact that the Retron 77 does not play Atari 7800 games. So the 2 buttons on the included controller will never be used at the same time. But another nice surprise is the fact that you can get everything you need inside the Retron box. What I mean is that you get the HDMI cable, the USB cable, and the power block to plug the USB cable into. So many things I purchased today, like cell phones, tablets, and yes, even the 2600 Plus, doesn't include the power brick. And most of us have a drawer full of those things, but at some point we're gonna run out. So it was nice not to have to go search for one after buying this unit. Now the Retron 77 initially released back in 2018 when USB-C was not the new standard. Thus you shouldn't expect the unit to come with one or use it. But overall I feel satisfied from the unboxing experience, and hopefully the testing will go just as well. But before we do that, let's look at the Atari 2600 Plus, released in 2023 by Atari. Now, I just said I like the packaging for the Retron 77, but the 2600 Plus feels like a legit new console. The box itself got me excited, and it's designed in a similar way to the Atari VCS box. I really like the game screenshots on the back. It reminds me of getting a new system years ago, and excitedly looking at the games I could be playing soon. Opening the box shows everything packaged neatly and tightly, not in a way too dissimilar from the Retron 77. The unit itself looks exactly like an Atari 2600, and you have to admit, leaning into that nostalgia was smart. Not unexpected, but a smart move regardless. And besides the USB-C port and the HDMI port, it almost looks like the 2600 to a T. You get a nice quick start guide, but no manual, which is disappointing on some level, but honestly, I probably wouldn't have even looked at the manual. You also get a pack-in cartridge complete with dust cover, and this thing has been talked about quite a bit. It's a multi-cart that uses switches rather than an on-screen menu, but it's fun getting a pack-in with your new system. I honestly won't play it much outside of testing, as I have most of these games already, but it's still cool to have. The controller itself, similar to the console, is almost spot on for the original CX40 controller. It even feels as stiff as I remember those joysticks being. Not really much to say here, it's a 2600 controller. You also get some pretty nice cables in the HDMI and USB-C cable that you'll want to use with the system, as it can transfer both data and power, which might be needed for future updates. Hint, hint. The Atari logo is plastered on everything, even the cables, and again, I think that's pretty cool. So looking at the 2 units side by side, taking into consideration what you get, the packaging, and just the feel of it all, I'm honestly shocked at how close the experience is between the 2. Everything was packaged nicely, and I enjoyed opening them both, and I was excited to get on with the testing for both of them. I like the compact size of the Retron 77, and let's face it, if you're a gaming collector, it's getting hard to cram all your stuff under the television. So having this small unit ensures that it will fit anywhere. But overall, I have to give it to the 2600 Plus. The multi-cart, the nostalgia, and the packaging is great. I do give Retron points for including the power brick, but a power brick won't win it for him. But let's start by talking Retron 77 and how that testing went. Now the Retron can only play 2600 games, not 7800. And even then, there are some notable compatibility issues with the Retron, like the fact that most, if not all, Activision games won't work with it. Not the cartridges anyway. And they probably never will. So if you want to play Activision games, such as Pitfall, Keystone Capers, Pressure Cooker, Dragster, and so forth, or if you want to play Atari 7800 stuff, then the 2600 Plus has already won. But there is a situation where the Retron 77 beats the 2600 Plus, and I want to talk about that right now. You see, the Retron 77 has a micro SD card slot with a massive 256 megabyte card pre-installed. But if you want to, you can go online and follow some instructions to flash a new emulator and ROMs to a new micro SD card. And yes, you can play your favorite 2600 games from the SD card. This includes the games that will not load off of a cartridge, such as Pitfall, Activision titles, and the more complicated late release stuff. So if you purchase this aftermarket unit that was advertised to play your favorite 2600 cartridges, because you don't want to use those cartridges, then this is the unit for you. It sounds really weird, and honestly, it sort of is. You could get a Raspberry Pi or something for the same price, if not cheaper, but setting those up is much harder, at least to me. The Retron 77 is pretty simple to get running off the SD card, so if all you want to do is play your favorite 2600 games without the hassle of buying, storing, and cleaning cartridges, then I think you'll actually do better with the Hyperkin offering. You also get a close to authentic controller packed in, and you can use original controllers and peripherals too. And the packed-in controller is actually pretty nice if you ask me. I almost prefer it to the original, but I haven't had it long enough to talk about how well it will last against the test of time. Finally, the Retron 77 is cheaper than the 2600 Plus, by almost half as much at online retailers like Amazon. At the time of the writing, it can be had for $73, but I've seen it as low as $60. There is also a special edition available, which seems to have a more orange translucent shell, and it appears to be the same price as this one. So the Hyperkin Retron 77 wins if you're only concerned with 2600 games and you don't want to mess with cartridges. But honestly, the 2600 Plus by Atari wins in almost every other category. It has the nostalgic look with the newest and most modern amenities. It has Atari 7800 support, allowing you to play the cartridges of that more advanced system, and it includes a cartridge of 10 classic hits right out of the box. The packaging very much follows the VCS formula, and I have to say I was pretty excited unpacking this baby. The console was front and center in the packaging, and I was getting more and more giddy as I opened the layers and got everything out. Hooking it up was as simple as these things can get. Plug in the USB-C for power, plug in the HDMI cable and run it to your television, plug in the controller and the included cartridge, and you're off and running with some classic gaming. I wish they would have changed the placement of the controller plugs and so forth. It wouldn't have been as authentic, but come on, this is an extremely old design, and things are placed in inconvenient places. But I suppose if they did that, some people would be upset by the lack of authenticity. I saw a user on Facebook that got right-angle adapters for the USB-C power port, HDMI port, and even a DB9, at least I think that's what it was, for the controller, which made things route better and looked much cleaner, so there's that solution if you need it. Out of the box, I was able to get it to work with some carts that the 77 wouldn't work with, such as Pitfall and a lot of Activision stuff. My only complaint is that your cartridges need to be very clean, as games that would boot up first try on my 7800 would fail to load a few times on the 2600 Plus, but they eventually all worked. Well, not all of them. For the 2600 games, I wasn't able to get Real Sports Boxing to work, which is a shame. That's an awesome game that I talked about in a video nobody watched. Give it a try. Well, when the support comes for the 2600 Plus, or if you have a 7800. Anyway, for 7800 stuff, almost everything from the original library works. I threw just about my whole collection into it, and the only non-starters were Rampage and Double Dragon. But man, was I disappointed by my homebrew testing. I have a massive collection of Atari 7800 homebrew and aftermarket games, and barely any worked right out of the box. Mostly I'd get a failure message, and this happened as I tested Popeye, Sirius, Plutos, Clax, Night Guy and Low Res World, Donkey Kong PK, Dragon's Havoc, and many, many more. This was pretty upsetting, but as luck would have it, the beta version of the 1.1 update was released to the public the night before. So I decided to try and update the console using the instructions on Atari Age, and I was surprised how easy it was. Now by easy, I mean it all worked the way they said it does. but it does require following the instructions carefully and being willing to download and run several programs. But after the update, my compatibility did not seem to improve, even though others said theirs did. And it turned out that I forgot a step. But this step took me a long time to complete, and it appears that the 2600 Plus needs to be plugged into a USB 2 port rather than a USB 3 port in order for the dumper to be updated. Now, all of this update is a beta, and I believe Atari will make things more straightforward for the official release, so I won't hold any of this against them. A beta is a test after all, so by downloading and applying it, you have to understand that you're installing something that is a work in progress and might require some work to get running properly. But anyway, after getting the ROM dumper updated, a ton of my Atari 7800 homebrew came to life on the 2600 Plus. I played Sirius, Plutos, Clax, Popeye, Night Guy, Donkey Kong PK, Bentley Bears Crystal Quest, Pac-Man Collection, and so many more. All these games ran with no issue for me. The only notable 7800 games that still aren't working is Rampage, which does play the intro music but now crashes shortly afterwards, Double Dragon, and Ricky and Vicky. And I talked to somebody while I was helping them understand why certain versions of Popeye weren't working, and trust me when I say, they are dedicated in getting everything working moving forward, and I for one believe them. So with all that said, who is the 2600 Plus for? Well, it's for a lot of people. People who used to have an Atari and forgot about how much they liked it. People who skipped the 7800 back in the day and are curious to see what they missed out on. People who only have modern televisions and displays and have had trouble getting their consoles to work on those TVs. People who are avid video game collectors or game players who weren't born when the original came out but want to collect for 2600 and 7800. I'm convinced that no other console besides the originals will have the compatibility that this one has by the end of it all. It is a brilliant unit to bring Atari into the modern age, and it makes its classic cartridges and games available to the public once again. I now understand why people have been raving about this thing since late November, and I'm glad to have it for the Atari network to cover and record footage for moving forward. So, let's finish by doing what we promised at the start of the video, and take a look at each console in a number of categories and declare a winner. First, let's look at the packaging itself, and both are packed nicely and have some really cool packaging designs. But with the addition of a 10-in-1 multi-cart, and some awesome screenshots on the back that make it feel like a console from back in the day, I think the 2600 Plus wins in the packaging department. As for size, I think the Retron 77 wins for being compact and able to fit just about anywhere, which is important as gamers have always struggled with cramming more and more stuff below their televisions. As far as design goes, I honestly think the front of the Retron 77 is too busy, and it can't compete with the nostalgic 2600 design. Of course, this category goes to the 2600 Plus. And as far as video output, while both look nice and vivid on my HD TV, something about the Retron 77 made the movements look a little jittery. I'm not sure why, but this wasn't present on the 2600 Plus, as all the movements on that console were buttery smooth, so that point is for Atari. As far as expandability and ease of updating, winner there, as of right now, is the Retron 77. Plugging a micro SD card into your computer, flashing the newest image, and then replacing it into the console is just so much easier than plugging a USB from a computer to a console, flipping and holding switches, and so forth. So that point goes to Hyperkin. As for compatibility with the Atari library, I have to say that Atari wins with their 2600 Plus, hands down. They have a whole nother console that the Retron 77 can't emulate. And even if you do just compare the 2600 compatibility, Atari still has the edge. Winner is the 2600 Plus. As for the packed-in controllers, I honestly like them both. The Hyperkin one has 2 buttons, but they do the same thing. But it's still nice for left-handed players and so forth. But the CX40 included with the Plus is near identical to the original, right down to the feel of the joystick movement. I'm going to call this one a push for right now, but we'll see what happens in the future. As far as pricing goes, it seems the Hyperkin 77 retails for about $73 on Amazon, but occasionally goes on sale for $60. The 2600 Plus is about $120, nearly twice as much, but again, it does a whole nother console library that the 77 can. So if you're interested in the Atari 7800 stuff, then you'd have to buy a second console just to play those games, if you want to go with Hyperkin's offering. For that reason, I think the 2600 Plus is actually a better value overall, but you can't argue with the numbers, so I'm calling this category a push for those reasons. So with all that, according to my count, Atari comes out in front. The 2600 Plus wins the battle. But really, it comes down to this. In both scenarios, you're likely buying the console for its ability to play real Atari cartridges, and the 2600 Plus is just superior in this regard. It has better compatibility, a better outlook in the future for improving compatibility, and plays 7800 games right out of the box. But if you want something that can emulate all your favorite 2600 games without the need for cartridges, while still using the original controllers and peripherals, then I think you'll want the Retron 77, as it's a better value in both price and its ability to do just that. And of course, these aren't the only ways to play these awesome games. You can always get one of the many original 2600 units, or even an original Atari 7800. Then you can have them modded for better visual and audio clarity. But they can be a bit finicky on modern televisions either way, and that's where these new units come in. But I'll be honest, I was one of those people that said I didn't need a 2600 Plus, as I already had a 2600 Junior and an Atari 7800, but it's so worth it for me just in the visual and audio clarity. Seeing these games on a modern display is incredible for longtime fans, and absolutely worth the money if that's of interest to you. But with all that said, I think it's time to wrap up this video. But now I want to hear from all of you. Do you own a Retron 77? How about a 2600 Plus? Are you happy with what you have? If you have both units, do you agree with my comparisons? Or did I get it all wrong? And finally, are your favorite games compatible with the console of your choice? Sound off in the comments down below. And be sure to subscribe and hit the bell so you can get my newest videos moving forward. I plan on covering the 1.1 update when it's officially released, and so forth. So subscribe to stay up on the latest and greatest Atari news, and just cool Atari videos in general. So, with all that said, I'm the 7800 Pro System Gamer, and I'm compatible with all your favorite Atari games. And I'd like to thank you for watching the Atari Network. Stay classy, Atarians.